Hey guys, it's Tara here. I'm just going to be walking through a lot of the Nvidia stuff today. It's gonna be this is the first video in a long series of videos I'm going to be doing about just PC optimizations, tweaking, things you can do just to get best performance, best latency out of your machine. It's going to be really catered towards gaming, but I'll try to add some stuff in there as well for people that are just trying to use their PC or having issues, Windows errors, things like that. Um, I'll try to cover as much as I can, as much as my knowledge surrounds. But we're just going to focus on strictly NVIDIA today and trying as best as we can to push our graphics card as much as we can and getting as many frames that we can out of it. So um, just going to start by going to NVIDIA. Obviously, the very first thing that we need is a driver for our graphics card. So I'm going to talk about obviously how to get the NVIDIA driver. That's pretty simple, but really you're going to be stripping down the NVIDIA driver, um, trying to get bare bones out of it, just so that it runs a little bit better, and it's not filled with a lot of the bloatware that the driver has. So actually, before I skip forward, there's an issue right now that if you choose GeForce and you choose, like I have a 16 series card, if you choose this, it's going to auto set you back to 30 series. I don't know why they decided to change this in the website, um, but it's not going to let you search through here. So what you guys are going to have to do is go down to beta and older drivers. It's still going to show you the newer drivers, uh, but for whatever reason they won't let you do it through the main search anymore. So obviously choose the product series you are. Um, if you don't know what that is, it's pretty much in the name of the card. So I have a 16 series because I have a 1660 Ti. If you had like a 1080, it would be a 10 series. If you had a 2070, that'd be a 20 series. So on and so forth. It's kind of the first number and the name of the driver, of the graphics card. I'm sorry. And then yeah, and then you'll choose actually which one. So like if I was a 2070, you see there's a 2070, 2080s. So, but that's how you do that. That's pretty straightforward. Obviously, operating system. Most of you guys are probably using Windows 10. Um, but in case you're not, there's that. And then you have your difference between standard and DCH. So standard is going to be um, if you have an NVIDIA control, like an NVIDIA control panel, um, as like a background service running, or in here. The DCH is like, I believe that's the Windows app. So if you have to download it through like Windows Store, um, I don't know. More likely, most of you guys will be on standard. If you're not on standard, it'll be DCH. There's not really a huge difference between which one's better. It all kind of does the same thing. So yeah, and then you just search, and you'll see all the. So they still show you your latest drivers. Obviously, it's the 14th today, and this is the 14th. So you still get all your latest drivers. It's not like it's older just because it says beta and older. You have all the drivers that are available to you. Um, I'm just gonna grab uh, this driver here. I generally don't go for the very newest drivers. This one literally got released today, um, which is probably a really bad bet. Most of the drivers that come out the day of, you're gonna want to give it a week before the drivers, the that NVIDIA can actually go in and fix a lot of the bugs of the drivers. There's just real no reason to do it the day of the release for it, or even 2 to 3 days of the release for it. You're just gonna have a lot of issues, mostly in the form of like frame rate stutters, maybe higher latency in the game, but mostly just frame rate stutters. Um, so there's really just no reason to do that. But don't get confused with frame rate stutters after first installing a new driver either. So like if you download a new driver, you're going to get frame rate stutters in the beginning because the driver has to build up shader cache. So don't think just because you got an older driver and it's doing that you're having bugs with the driver. More likely the driver's fine. It's just needs to build up shader cache. The thing with the newer drivers is even after you build up the shader cache, you'll still get issues, and that's because of the bugs. So anyways, that was a lengthy explanation, but we're just going to go ahead and grab this driver. Which you'll need the game ready, not the studio drivers, unless for whatever reason you're actually using it for studio purposes. But I think if you're at that point, you'll understand which driver you need to grab. So just go ahead and download here. Just show in folder, and let that download. For this next step, you'll need either like 7-zip or WinRAR, some kind of extract folder, or extracting program, sorry. You can't just simply extract it, won't actually give you the option. Now, partly is because it's an unconfirmed download, but it won't give you the option later anyways. You'll have to do it with the program. So let this finish downloading here, and then I'll extract it. I use 7-zip. I personally like 7-zip. See, like, here's the actual thing. There's no extract ability. Like, if I was to go down here, you'd see the extract all. Well, that doesn't happen for these, so you have to have the alternate program. So we're going to do extract files. Just click OK. And it's going to do its thing. I'm just going to leave it do it. You'll see the new folder pop up here as it's extracting. I'll just let that run. Okay. Then you come to the new folder, and this is the stripping part of it. So for a lot of you guys, you're gonna, I feel like a lot of people now use GeForce Experience more, and I don't know. My recommendation for you guys is not to use GeForce Experience. And the reason why is because it's going to sit in the background and it's record all your stuff, and that's great. I know a lot of people love it for clips, but that's going to be performance loss and latency increase because you're going to be doing another process that's basically similar to rendering your game. It's not as extensive as rendering your game, but it's recording your game, which still takes a lot of CPU effort. So you're going to lose performance by constantly having your clips on. So my recommendation for everyone who's trying to push the maximum amount they can out of their graphics card, don't run GeForce Experience. But if you are, you're just going to want to go ahead and leave the GeForce Experience folder. You actually have to leave it regardless, but we won't take out the next step. So anyways, everything else besides GeForce Experience and N12 and NContainer, we're going to go ahead and remove. Keep this one if you're going to be using GeForce Experience. Otherwise, remove it. Go ahead and get rid of everything else here. I want to keep EULA. I don't know if we need list devices, but I generally keep it. And we'll need to set up configs and the actual exe. And then we're going to go to GeForce Experience here. Now, if you're going to be using GeForce Experience, don't even touch this folder. Just leave it. But if you're not going to be using it, we're going to want to delete everything besides privacy policy, the EULAs, and the functional consents, and the license. Alright. And now you'll have your everything installed. Or not installed, everything stripped. And then we would go to the install. So we'll do setup. And what you'll see in the setup, and if you've obviously you've had to have installed graphics drivers before. Maybe you haven't, but more than likely you probably have installed graphics drivers before at this point. But if you get a custom here, you'll see I'm not actually going to install the driver since I already have my driver and I don't want this newer version. But this would be what it would look like. You'll only see the graphics driver component if you have it fully stripped and correctly stripped. You shouldn't see PsychX software, HD audio, GeForce Experience. Any of those won't be in there, and that's a good thing. What you would normally do is you click next, it'll install, and then you'd finish, and you'd have to restart your computer. I believe sometimes they don't make you restart. It all depends on the version of the graphics card driver, I believe. But more likely you'll need to restart. So anyways, that's stripping the driver and installing it. And we're going to move on to the next part of this would be, we'll get to MSI Afterburner later. We'll go ahead and do NVIDIA control panels. That's a good segue from that NVIDIA control panel. So once you got the driver installed, you're going to want to go into NVIDIA control panel and you're going to want to change everything. And this is just going to, again, really maximize the ability for the GPU to have high performance. All my settings are already set up, but I'm going to walk through each one. Sharpening off, you don't want GPU scaling on. You want that disabled. You want off for ambient occlusion, anisotropic filtering, all the anti-aliasing. So basically just off all the way. That's going to be none. There's no actual off setting. It's actually blanked out. You want off here, off here. You could set a background application frame rate. that's totally up to you. Basically what it does is whenever you tab out of something, so if I'm like, if this is my application, say this was running at like 300 frames, and I went like this, well, if you had a maximum application frame rate of 60, well then now in the background it's only running at 60 frames. So maybe if you like to tab out in between different games, that would be useful. Otherwise, just leave it off. It's not really useful. Your CUDA GPUs, it'll be set to all by default. You're more likely to only have one GPU. If you have multiple, you're going to want to run one unless you're using SLI, which really isn't that useful, and you probably shouldn't be using it. It does not really support it very well in most games, but more than likely you guys will just be using one, and the default setting is fine. DSRs you want off. Low latency mode you'll want off. Don't do ultra unless you're like maxing out your GPU in game. If you're getting like 90, I want to say it's 96 to 98%. It might actually just be 90% or higher. But it's got to be somewhere in that threshold of basically fully maxing out your GPU. If you're not hitting that point at all, don't even bother with ultra. It's actually going to make it worse. You could set low latency mode on. I personally don't. I just all low latency mode on does is it changes the frame rate pre-rendered frames. I'm sorry. It changes your pre-rendered frames from what the default I think is 3 to 1. But you can go ahead and do that in NVIDIA Profile Inspector. And I swear turning on low latency mode to on does something else besides just limiting frame rates. I think there's some other back-end processes that happen because I swear to God it feels worse than just limiting my pre-rendered frames in NVIDIA Profile Inspector to 1. It's supposed to achieve the same thing, but low latency mode on does something else, and it just does not feel the same. So I just leave it off. Maximum frame rate, go ahead and leave that off. You're going to want to use your in-game frame rate limiter. It's generally a little less latent, and it's just easier to deal with than having to do it in here. Multi-frame sampled, AA, just leave that off. OpenGL rendering GPU, just leave whatever default is. You won't be using OpenGL, I don't think, unless you're like coding or something for like a game. Rarely, basically all games now are DirectX 11 or up, so you won't use OpenGL at all. Power management mode, you'll want maximum performance. Preferred refresh rate, you want highest available. You want shader cache on. You want anisotropic sample optimization on. You want negative log bias to allow. You could clamp it. Technically, it's not really going to change anything. You guys won't probably do a negative log bias at all. You might for some games, but it's not likely. So just leave it on allow. It won't change anything. Quality, you want high performance. Trilinear optimization you want on. Threaded optimization you want on. Triple buffering you want off. Vertical sync off. You could set the virtual reality pre-rendered frames. It won't have any effect on your game unless you're playing VR. Same with this one. So those will be default set to 1 and off, I believe. This one might be set to use a 3D application setting. It won't matter if you're not playing VR, guys. It won't do anything. So you can just leave them how it is. Obviously, this is for people that aren't going to be using VSync or aren't going to be using triple buffering in your game to help with like the G-Sync. So if you are using that, you might want to change the way those settings work. I'm not going to get into it because I don't even like to deal with G-Sync. I feel like it's awful and I hate it. So I'm not going to even go there. Latency on those things is just always worse than just playing and dealing with frame rate tearing. You don't even get that much frame rate tearing now because of DWM anyways. So speaking of which, this is the next thing you're going to want to do. Is actually go to Desktop Windows Manager, the DWM EXE, and we're going to want to set this power management mode from adaptive to maximum performance. Now you're going to have to add it. So what you'll do is you'll click Add, Browse. It's want to be Windows and System32, and you're just going to kind of search. Just click D while you're click on something and click D, and just keep scrolling down. It's going to auto go through everything that's named that way. And I kind of already passed it here, but it's right here underneath DVD play. And you'll click open, and then it'll add it to the programs here. And you'll scroll down to power management mode. Everything else will be globally set once you set these global settings over here, except power management mode. You want to put this in maximum performance, and I'll explain why in a second. But first I'll show you we'll be doing the same thing with Windows Explorer, but instead of being in System 32 this time, we'll just be in Windows. You'll hit E, and it should take you right to Explorer. Same thing, power management mode, maximum performance. And the reason we're doing that is because, unfortunately, in Windows 10, Windows Explorer and DWM is so heavily integrated into graphics processing and displaying your graphics that by putting these power management modes at adaptive and basically throttling the amount of power that those programs get, it actually really hurts your graphics output. So it basically those overlays that sit on top of your graphics card, if they're being throttled, you're getting the image out slower. It's getting processed slower. So you don't want that. You want to just be able. I mean, realistically, we want to be able to disable DWM and minimize Windows Explorer's ability to affect the game, but we haven't been able to do that fully and really extensively since Windows 7. So now that Windows 10 is so prevalent, and probably all of you guys will be playing on Windows 10, you'll want to go ahead and do these settings just to help out. You might not even realize the difference, but the difference is there. Anyways, I'll move on from that. So we're going to go ahead to change resolutions. The next thing we're going to want to do, and we're going to want to make sure you're on the PC settings. Don't go to these Ultra HD, HDSD settings. Those, if you go to the same thing like this native, same thing that I'm doing here. It's 1920 by 1080. It won't let you put a high refresh rate, or a higher refresh rate rather. I can get to 144. Obviously, it's capping me at 120 here. You're going to want to choose the PC and choose the highest refresh rate possible. That stuff's pretty common knowledge. I think you'll be able to figure that out. The second thing is we're going to want to check use Nvidia color settings, and we'll want to put the output range to full. It'll more likely be set to limited. We're just going to go ahead and swap it to full and apply that. Then we'll want to do adjust desktop color settings. If you guys play Fortnite, I know a lot of you guys will probably change these with vibrance to 75. This is where you would do it at. And that's really all that's there. Here, you can mess with brightness, contrast. I mean, you're not going to get a whole lot out of it. Just kind of whitewash or change the colors a little bit around. But you can do the same thing on your monitor settings, so it's not too useful. Rotate display doesn't really have anything here unless you're changing the orientation, but there's not too much reason for that. We won't even be using HDCP, so we can obviously skip that one too. Set up digital audio. I just turned my digital audio off. It's gonna keep auto defaulting it back to being on, so you don't even really need to mess with this. I turn it off just for my sanity, so I know that it's like I'm trying to turn it off, but it's gonna default back the minute you click apply. It doesn't matter. The minute you exit out of this control panel, it'll switch right back. It's really, really annoying, but that's how it is. When we go to scaling, we're gonna want to set it to no scaling. We're gonna want to perform scaling on the display. Make sure it's set to display, sorry, and not GPU. And we're gonna override the scaling mode set by games and programs. Obviously, you'll see the apply button down here. I don't see it because I've already done this. That's if you have multiple displays. I just have the one, so I'm going to skip over it. This is just for multiple display configuration. Obviously, I can't show you guys that. Anyways, you'll set it to with Nvidia settings. We'll go to advanced, and you'll want it at full. You can change, again, you can change some of the colors and stuff over here. Obviously, not that important. Actually not last, but the second to last thing will be adjust video image settings. We're going to put edge enhancement, use Nvidia setting, noise reduction, use Nvidia setting, and you can turn off deinterlacing. This is mostly just for watching movies and DVDs. It's not really going to affect your game, but I turn it off anyways. The last thing will be enable developer settings. I apologize. And we'll go to manage GPU performance counters, and we're going to allow access to the GPU performance counters to all. Alright, the next thing we're going to do So we're going to go ahead and go to Nvidia Profile Inspector. And I'll have the link for this in the description so you guys can download this program. It's a really, really nice program. It helps so much for altering things within your graphics card. You can either do the global driver profile, or if you have a game specifically in mind, you can set it. I play Fortnite, so I would set my Fortnite settings, but you can do anything. Formula Truck, Fusion, they have everything. I believe they just got. I mean, you can see this thing as I scroll through. There's so much. I'm sure they have. I believe they have Battlefield. Yeah, they got Battlefield. Probably Call of Duty Modern Warfare as well. Maybe not. Maybe it's Call of Duty. Yeah. So they've got all that. Just about any game that you have installed, it will be on here. So we're just gonna go with the base, and we'll just kind of. This will be global. So if you alter global to apply to all your games, probably the easiest way to do it. We're gonna go ahead and walk through this. So the frame rate limiters, you just want to leave them alone. The frame rate limiter mode, if you disable this, which you can, you can force it off, and you can force frame rate limiter off. If you do this, sometimes the game will still run its own frame rate limiter, and then other times you'll break the frame rate limiter in game, and it'll just completely uncap your frames, and you will have no way of capping them. So just don't even really want to touch this. The Nvidia ones that you have, and being able to change it, I know there's some that are like low latency ones. It's still a frame rate limiter at the end of the day. It's not going to be that much better. So just let the game do its own thing. We go to G-Sync, and we're just going to want to disable everything in G-Sync, because we're not going to be wanting to use G-Sync, and we don't want any G-Sync settings being applied at all. If your display doesn't support it, it won't be applied anyways, but that's just a nice way to force it off in case you do have a G-Sync monitor or you just don't want anything possibly happening. Maximum pre-rendered frames. This is the thing I was talking about earlier with the low latency mode. In Nvidia settings, we're just going to set this to 1. It's the same exact thing that low latency mode on would do. As again, I'll explain again though. I just feel like for whatever reason, low latency mode being on does feel worse than just having this set to 1 as pre-rendered frames. Preferred refresh rate, we'll want highest available. Triple buffering and ultra low latency will both want off. Vertical sync will want off. We'll want the smooth behavior off. And tear control you can only leave as standard, so just leave it as standard. Gamma correction, that would be default off. You'll want to turn line gamma disabled. Leave these off. Leave disabled for multi-sampling and super sampling. Leave FAA off. FXAA will want to also disallow that. Just keep the 0 off, off. You'll want those all just disabled. Off for the anisotropic filtering settings. Prevent anisotropic filtering. I apologize. On. We'll want to prevent that. Filter optimizations. It's technically already prevented at this point. Sometimes the game will override this though. So if we're going to be, if it does end up having it, we'll want optimizations for it. Just leave the rest of these settings alone. They'll mostly just be applied from earlier when you did Nvidia settings and Nvidia control panel. Big one you'll want is force P2 state off. So you'll want your GPU running in P0 state. If you can force that, which this setting does, I believe. I know certain games will go back to P2 state. It's very weird. The GPU driver or the GPU card is very finicky with it, but try our best to keep it in P0 state, so we're going to be forcing this off. Keep it in single display mode, disabled, off, maximum performance, shader cache on, Psych-X visual indicator, you don't want that on, and third mode optimization you'll want on. Don't even worry about SLI. More than likely you won't be using SLI because you have one graphics card, and if you are using SLI, I'm very sorry because it is not very good and it's not supported by most games. So probably look into getting one powerful graphics card instead of 2 lower powerful graphics cards. Most of this won't have an effect on your game. A lot of it's OpenGL stuff, so it won't even change anything for DirectX 12 games. But a big one will be enable Ansel. Ansel is the GeForce Experience clipping in the background. Um, so it's basically like an overlay that's constantly recording um, or supporting the recording. So I just always force that off. I haven't seen a huge improvement with it on or off. I believe the Ansel does automatically record, but I think if you strip the driver from having GeForce Experience to record anyways, it might not even work. I really can't tell you, but I always force it off anyways. Another one we want to change is maximum frames allowed. So we're going to want to set that to 1. That's actually similar to the pre-rendered frames for whatever reason. If you set pre-rendered frames to 1 but don't change this maximum frames allowed, it gets really weird, and I don't believe it actually fully forces 1 pre-rendered frame. It'll still kind of do 2. So you want to make sure that that's also set to 1. Memory allocation. I always say moderate pre-allocation, but that's just because I had read on a Blurbuster's guide a while back. Someone did really extensive frame rate tests and benchmarks with having both moderate and aggressive on, and moderate seemed to be slightly better, although both of them will give you a performance boost over policy as needed. So I've seen some people opt for aggressive. I've seen some people opt for moderate. Either way, it's going to be better than just policy as needed, so choose one of those. Predefined Ansel usage, you want that disallowed. And you'll want to go down to variable refresh rate and just go ahead and disable the vsync control. Again, if you don't have vsync on, it probably won't even change anything. I just sometimes set these, force set these options just to make sure. And then you just want to come up and apply changes. I'm actually not sure which one this is giving me an issue for, but I might have to. If you see this, you can click continue, but if you refresh your profile, some of it will change. So you'll just want to go back. It looks like this one. Okay, this is the one that's not letting me fully set it, but sometimes if you have applied other things, it won't work. So I have to go back and change all of these and just make sure. Okay, so I think it might be this frame rate allowed. Could be. Oh, hold on. Yeah, so it looks like maximum frames allowed is not allowing, it's not letting me turn that off. Okay, or turn that to 1, sorry. If you can't do it through global, like I'm having this issue where I can't do it through the global, just find your game, just search your game up in the top bar, and do that same thing for your game, and it will work in your game. I have it working for the games that I play, the profile settings. I have it working where it's maximum frames allowed as that 1 as well as pre-rendered frames. So you'll just have to go and do it per game basis. Sometimes certain global controls don't work just because it has to also do the graphics. It's just not gonna let me do anything. Okay, just because the graphics card has to also render your display for Windows, so it can't isolate just the game. So kind of all of that, it won't let me apply any of this, which really sucks, but you can take the same thing that I did there and just do that for an individual profile. Like I have my Fortnite profile set up already, and you'll see the same thing where I have, vsync disabled, pre-allocation for memory here. I'm actually not sure why that's not at 1, because that should have been at 1. But see, it lets me actually apply it now. And same thing here, so you'll have everything, all this off, maximum pre-rendered frames. It's all going to work here if you're actually in your game versus trying to force it for everything. Utility v3. I'm going to go ahead and open this up. We're going to make sure we run it as an admin, otherwise it's going to give you access denied error. And we're going to want to look for a Nvidia graphics card. And we're going to go ahead and this will be unchecked for you guys, and this will say undefined. It'll look just like this, and you're going to want to check it and put it as high interrupt priority. Now before you guys all jump the gun on this, you're going to want to make sure to go ahead and reset a restore point. It's really unlikely that you're going to have a blue screen of death from this, but it's possible, especially if you're running an older graphics card. So just to play it safe, make sure to set a restore point, and basically that way you don't have to run the risk of getting in a blue screen loop. After you've set it to MSI mode checked and high interrupt priority, just go ahead and click apply. There's other things in here you can set. Don't set them for now. I'll do another video later discussing the rest of it. But there is things you can set in here to MSI mode that will cause you to blue screen loop, and you won't be able to get back to your computer. So just try to avoid that for now. I'm going to be moving on to interrupt Affinity tool. You actually want to run this as an admin. You get the same thing. You'll have like access denied errors if you don't run it as an admin. We're going to look for our graphics card, so just type N for Nvidia, and, until you see your Nvidia GeForce, and then it'll be like whatever card name you have, or yeah, card name you have. So we'll set the mask for it. I have it set to CPU 2. You're going to just want to look for a semi strong processor. Obviously CPU 0, or technically the first CPU, will be the strongest, but that's the one that's going to be dealing with the most interrupts, and you're going to be looking for a CPU that doesn't have to deal with a lot of interrupts, but also that has a lot of performance. And the reason why is because you don't want to put it on a core that can't process the graphics card interrupts really well, but you don't also want something that's overloaded with so much stuff that the graphics card never gets processed. So CPU 2 is a good one. Another one I see commonly is CPU 4, and I believe that's based on location. Certain people's PCs CPU's 4 is closer to the graphics card than CPU 2 is, and some people say location matters more. Some people say strong processor matters more. I just go for CPU 2, just because CPU 0 is going to get the most amount of interrupts. CPU 1 usually takes all the interrupts that CPU 0 gets overflowed by. So CPU 2 is going to be pretty clean. No real interrupts happening there. Not an overflow of them anyways. And it's still a really strong processor. Anyways, you'll click OK. OK to this. And you'll ask if you'd like to attempt to restart the device now. You can either click no, and it'll just restart when you, it'll just apply whenever you restart your PC, or you can click yes, and your screen will flash. I don't want OBS to have to restart, so I'm going to click no. Either way, if your screen flashes, it's not going to like kill your graphics card or anything. The screen will just flash black, but you'll be fine. And then hit done. Alright. And last but not least, we're going to go to MSI Afterburner. And I already have a profile applied, but I'll kind of walk you guys through the steps here of how to apply a profile. So I'll go ahead and reset it as if I have nothing applied, right? For you guys, this is what it's going to look like. You'll have this. I'll go ahead and restart it. You'll have this locked. You won't even be able to alter this. If you try to move it, you'll just move the entire thing. It won't be like malleable. So what you'll need to do is go to Advanced Properties here, or Advanced Settings rather, and you'll want to unlock voltage control and unlock voltage monitoring, and then go ahead and click Apply. Alright, and then you just want to bump it up to 100%. And for power limit, it'll probably be at 0 as well. It won't actually be at 50, it'll be at 0. You can go ahead and put the power limit to 100. Click this little button to unlock the temp limit and put that a little bit higher if you'd like, or you can keep a lower temp limit. It's up to you guys. Click this button to turn fan speed from being auto adjusted to 100%. I always put fan speed at 100%. It's going to keep the GPU a little bit cooler, which is always better for performance. So when you're talking about CPU parts, cooler is better because you get more performance out of cooler parts. Then you're going to want to adjust your core clock and memory clock. That's sort of its own video in and of itself, but I'll kind of give you a brief summary of which. Actually, I'll give you a full summary because we're here, we're doing it. Why not? So for core clock, you're going to want to set this number. I would say start with like a base of 100, and you're going to want to apply it. And you'll want to run a game, whatever game you have, just go ahead and run it. Or you can run Heaven benchmarking, which is an awesome way to do it. Probably a little bit more stable way, like more consistent way to do it. And I'll put a link for Heaven benchmarking in the description too, so you can get that. But basically, you're going to want to keep increasing your core clock by about 10 until the program just crashes. So either your game will crash or the benchmarking will crash. And once that happens, you know you have too high of a core clock. So you're going to want to go down about 10, and then if it crashes again, then you're going to want to go down to 10 more, and you just basically do that until it no longer crashes. Memory clock's a little bit more tricky. So for core clock, it'll crash right away. It'll instantly crash if it's too high of a core clock. Memory clock won't, technically. If it's a really, really high memory clock, yes, it will crash right away. But you can get a memory clock that'll stay stable for a certain amount of time, and then it'll crash later. So if you put a memory clock that wasn't ridiculously high, but somewhere in the middle, between not really doing anything, like at 0, or like 1,000, which would be like way too high. If you said like 500, maybe you'll be stable for like 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, and then it'll crash, and you'll think it's a normal game crash, but really it's your memory clock being too high. So that one's a little finicky because it's going to take time. So what you're going to have to do is either run the benchmarking test for a while until it crashes, or you can basically just set this to a number, probably somewhere around like 150 to 200 would be a good like base starting number, depending what GPU you have. So if you have a higher GPU, like a 20 series, you can get that even closer to 300s, and it's a pretty safe megahertz clock. If you have something like a lower tier card, like the 1660 Ti that I have, I can really not get much of a memory clock. I think I have mine set to 80. I could probably push this a little bit higher. I've had it run at 200 before, but I've had crashes, and I couldn't tell if that was because of just Fortnite being like in a trashy update at that time and just crashing a lot, or if it was because of my memory clock. So I just put a really safe memory clock because I don't feel like I was lazy. Don't really feel like testing and sitting there forever. So I just went with one that I knew was super safe. But really, you can't get much more than 200 out of the 16 series cards. Like you won't be able to go too much higher than 200 unless I think you're using like a 1660 Super. I know that one can be clocked a little bit higher. So you'll have to play around with this number a lot, and it's just going to take time. But start somewhere around 100. If you have a really nice card, maybe 200, and just apply it. Play whatever game you're playing. If you notice that it's crashing incrementally, like you'll crash it, you'll restart the game, you'll play for a little bit, it crashes again, that's going to be your memory clock. If you want to get that number like really precise, just run Heaven. If you have the time to do it, run the Heaven benchmark and just keep on running it until you're not getting crashes anymore. With the memory, just keep tweaking the memory until you're no longer getting crashes out of it. That's going to take a lot of time. So for people that are lazy like me, or just don't want to dedicate the time but rather just play and just figure it out while playing, you can do that too. I guess I should probably put the warning out there that yes, you are tweaking with your graphics card and its voltage and its clock rate. So yes, you run the rate of potentially damaging your GPU. Look guys, I'm going to be real with you. Especially now with the newer CPUs, GPUs, they have a lot of safety features on them. So if the core clock or the memory clock ever got way too high to where it was actually going to damage the card's going to auto shut down and revert to just default settings, which is basically 0 for everything. Um, or if the temps get too high, same thing will happen. It'll revert to default settings. So you're really not going to run that unless you basically had that issue where you got too high and then you just set it again, got too high, and you just kept on doing that and just pushing the card and like purposely trying to damage it. It's going to be really hard to damage it. So yes, the risk is there, but it is a low one, and doing a overclock through MSI Afterburner is a pretty safe overclock. It's about as safe as you can get when it comes to overclocking. But I do gotta let you guys know that there's a possible chance that things may happen, and you do need to do this at your own risk. Because, if something happens, then, I don't want to be responsible for that. So, because it's your guys' stuff, this is your guys' choice. So, I just do want to let you guys have that information and know that you do run the risk of possibly having some issues with your card or limiting the lifetime of your card as well. Alright. Well, that's it. That basically covers everything. I'll make sure links for all these things are in the description. But yeah, that's just about everything for when it comes to Nvidia cards and just trying to push every little FPS, inch of FPS, percentage of power, however you want to say it, out of the card. So I just hopefully this helps a lot and you guys are able to see some serious improvements in your game. Alright, peace out.